Welcome to Altar of the Demo Gods. If you're wondering what advice from two experienced sales engineers sounds like, it's a little like this.
Welcome back to Altar of the Demo Gods. I'm Keith Wilson, joined by my co-host, John Morton. John, how you doing tonight?
I'm a little bit tanner, but good.
That's right. Well, you came back from a tropical vacation, but you've been greeted by much colder climates. Okay, what's the temperature out in Denver right now?
Right now it's probably closer to 23, but while I was gone, it was like negative teens, negative 15, 16.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So I'm surprised because you've got temperatures that are somewhat closer to what I've got in Georgia right now. Because we're in the
Wow,
we're in
yeah,
the
I
low.
was just in Georgia too. Me and Keith missed each other.
That's right, you were. Yeah, you came out for a Falcons game, which I mean, I guess that's part of the SC lifestyle as well, right? Going to sporting events for work. But no, you went on a vacation before that. That was your tropical destination. You know, the tropical destination.
The tropical
it wasn't Jordan.
It wasn't Atlanta.
No,
you were correct. But no, it was good. It was good.
Yeah. So, if you're not a sales engineer, if you haven't worked in sales before, sometimes you'll do these customer events where you get to go to a cool sporting event, and John got to go to a Hawks game. So that's pretty neat. Today, in today's episode, we are going to talk about taking on pushbacks and addressing objections. As the old saying goes, with every no, you're a step closer to a yes, right? So that's a lot of objection handling is done by the seller or the AE, the account rep, whatever you want to call them, I think. But there's still definitely a lot of technical objections that have to be overcome as well.
Yeah.
So let's start with John. How do you like to handle objections? You know, you're in a meeting and somebody says, well, wait a minute, I need your product to do XYZ. It doesn't do XYZ. We're done.
It's always fun, Keith. So yeah, just bringing it back one step. I think there's all different kinds of objections, and you're right, technical is one of them. So I'll pick on that a little bit. But one thing I always like to do is bring it back to business value. So to your point, if someone comes to me and they said, I needed your product to do X, Y, and Z. Normally we call that like success criteria we talked about over time. I like to ask the genuine question of like, why? What is the business value you get out of XYZ? Is it literally checking some sort of compliance box and you have to have these functions? Are you using them? Are you looking for some sort of new capability you never had before? So for me, I like to ask more questions as that very beginning of technical objection handling. And I like to bring it back to the business. Why do you want those things?
Well, and let's be clear too. You're always going to have objections. It's part of the process. Why is it part of the process? Because no product can do everything, right? And I would argue too that the end user doesn't always know what they want, which is why you have to ask why. You have to get to the root of things, right? So it's very common for objections to be raised all throughout the sales process, whether it be based on price, implementation, or technical aspects that you've agreed on. So when you're presented with an objection, you have an opportunity to turn that into something positive, though. John, you said you start with trying to understand why. What's at the root of this? Can you talk more about that? Maybe even provide an example to help illustrate how we could take that to a positive spin. I know we're talking very general here, but how can we take an understanding of why somebody's objecting to something and turn it into a positive reason why they should say yes instead of no?
Yeah. Let's pivot to like a $1 million problem here, right? And this is legitimately a fact. I will tell you definitively, this is the objection I deliver to people who are trying to sell to me all the time. And it could be something as simple as taking a meeting. Keith Wilson, I have this awesome product that I'd like for you to see. can you give me 5 minutes of your time?
I don't have
Even
5
there,
minutes.
there's objections.
Yeah, I don't have 5 minutes.
You don't have 5 minutes, right?
Yeah.
That's not my problem. Who is this? How did you get my phone number? Right. So you're right. There's
Okay. Yeah.
objections all the way throughout. And
let's use that as an example. Then let's start in the very beginning. You're doing a cold call. Now I know some sales engineers are listening to this going, cold call. I'm a sales engineer and not a sales rep because I hate cold calls. But let's pretend that you're doing a cold call as an SE here. So you're talking to me, right? Can I have 5 minutes of your time? You're trying to get 5 more minutes of my time. Well, I've got all sorts of objections that I think you're talking to the wrong person. I don't deal with that. What do you do with that objection?
Yeah. So even then, right? Like in the beginning, I kind of level set and I asked for 5 minutes up front. And what I would normally do is I pivot and just say, okay, Keith, I know you're a very, very busy person. How about you just give me 90 seconds, right? If you like what we hear, we can schedule more time. So it's even navigating an objection in that way. We're coming to a compromise where maybe I can just get that little bit of mind share. That way I can, go a little bit farther and say whatever it is I'm trying to say. But even in that very beginning, there's that.
I want to point out something that's kind of niche to cold calling that you just did there too. It's where you're really only trying to get 20 seconds more time, 30 seconds more time. How much longer can I get this person to keep listening to what I have to say, right? Because let's be real. Most of the time, if you get a cold call, you're hanging up on them right away. That person's job is to keep you on the phone, right? To get you that information. So you're really just trying to intrigue them and get that more time. But yeah, it takes, in that context, it takes like rapid fire objection handling, right?
Right. Yep.
I'm curious, John,
and,
where
there's many ways. Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say there's many ways we can pivot, but I want to see where you're taking it because, there's so many things we could discuss. But, what are you thinking here?
So I want to know, we've talked about sales process on here before. I want to know where you commonly see objections during the sales process. Where is it you most commonly? Obviously, they happen throughout, but where are they most common? And do you? I've got follow-up questions. Let's start with that. Where are they most common?
Yeah, that's fair. So we'll leave it for another day, right? We'll have a whole chat about it. Maybe we can even bring in some BDRs who do cold calling. They can give us objection handling. The net of that was it's just part of the sales process. Let's say we do get them to at least agree to listen, right? We're giving them a 90-second pitch and, or trying to get a conversation for a few more seconds. A lot of the objections I always hear, whether it's a cold call, whether it's a discovery call, whether it's a technical deep dive with architecture, is we already have this problem solved. That's one of the ones I've been dealing with most recently is we already have this problem solved, whatever the problem may be. Whether it's like ransomware, I already own a solution. Whether it's deploying software, right? I already built something that automates things for me. Anything like that, right? I would say the number one objection is that.
I want to pause there for a moment. So that's the number one objection, meaning you're hearing that from multiple people, right? These objections that you hear, do you tend to hear the same objections? Or are they scattered? This company has this set of objections is different than this company that has this set of objections. Which one's more common? Is it, we have, these are the 5 objections we get the most, or is it just all over the place?
It can be all over the place. So it varies from different stages of the engagement we're in, right? Whether it's even just as simple as, will I take your call or not? But they normally do come up in certain types of objections. There is definitively types. One is, you could call it competitive displacement. When they think they have the problem solved, right? They already have a competitor to me who's trying to do something. And that can literally be another tool. It could be a homegrown solution. That's one thing, right? Another thing may be I just don't need that product, right? I am shopping for a minivan. I don't need a Ferrari, right? So it's not a good fit for that person. Same vein, pricing, right? I can't afford a Ferrari. I'm here to buy a minivan, sir. Mm-hmm. I got $1,000 to put down on a $30,000 vehicle. And then my personal favorite and the most complicated one to handle, and we'll really dig into this one, is the do nothing, right? I'm comfortable with where I'm at. I'm happy with the investments I made. I like what you're saying, but I don't need to do anything. Do nothing is probably the hardest objection that I have to deal with. They have no pain or incentive to do something.
Oh, again, I was just going to ask what makes it so difficult. So you're saying there's no pain, no incentive. We've always talked about that before too. If there's no pain, there's no deal, right? If I'm not hurting, I'm not willing to spend the money necessarily, unless you can show me some sort of return for my investment, which is difficult to do. You know, depending on what you sell, that can be difficult to do, right?
Yeah. And that's hard to label too for me. Objection as an objection is do nothing, but to me it is an objection. I'm comfortable with where I'm at, right? That's still an objection.
So how do you handle that then?
Oh man, you gotta have a good value prop, man. So to your point, if there's no pain, there's no deal. We beat up on that all the time. That's to me, that's clear, right? But how do you figure out if there's no pain, right? If they're comfortable and happy, you got to ask a lot more smarter questions. You got follow Ted. Tell me about, explain to me how, describe for me. And then closed-ended questions, yes or no.
Hold on a second.
You got to keep trying. There's something there.
You breezed through that real quick. And I think there's probably a lot of listeners who haven't heard that acronym before. That could be our acronym of the week this week. We haven't done one in a couple of weeks. So TED is our acronym. Is our acronym of the week this week. Explain again. What is TED?
Yeah. Yeah, so when I think about asking smart questions, there's two types of questions you can ask. There's questions that are open-ended that allow the person you're talking to talk a lot more, right? We want, in sales, you always want to talk 20%, listen 80%. So you want to ask questions, and they fall under TED, that are more open-ended. Tell me about how you're doing this today. Can you explain to me this process? Can you describe for me what a day in your life is like, right? So these are kind of open-ended questions that are qualified as TED that allow somebody to really
describe, tell, explain, describe. Yeah.
So
okay.
That's it right there. So TED is very useful in getting someone to just talk to you, right? You want them to talk to you, but you also want to balance it out with closed-ended questions as well. Nobody wants to be interrogated, and sometimes they're adverse to telling you everything, especially in disciplines like security. They're the absolute worst. TED is an absolute, they're super protective. And you want closed-ended questions as well. Very basic, yes or no. Do you have this problem? Yes or no. You can pivot either way. Like them saying no isn't a bad thing, right? Them saying yes isn't a bad thing. So it's a mix of both open-ended and closed-ended questions with TED and yes and no.
Do you do anything to prepare for objections? Or I mean, you coach a team of sales folks. How do you prepare them to handle objections?
Yeah, man. Now we're getting into the meat of things. Now we're teaching people something real here. If you're not doing your homework about who you're calling into, you're wrong. I will be that guy. You're wrong. What does that mean? That means before you call into somebody, or before you have a meeting, or before you're getting to where you need to be, you should understand who you're calling into. What's their name? What's their title? What's their job history on like LinkedIn? Have they written any articles that they're really proud about? Is there anything that they're particularly interested in that you can gather from a digital footprint of that person? Respectively, what organization do they work for? What is the industrial vertical? What is the purpose of that org? Do they make money? Do they not? Are they state, fed, local? There is so much research you should have done beforehand that if an objection comes up, you can quickly pivot to something that's related to or can address this individual conversation. So if you're not prepared, you're wrong.
Yeah. What's the saying, fail to prepare and prepare to fail?
Yeah. I mean, it's that simple, man. So if you're ready, when the objection comes up, you'll know. I mean, you'll already have a good understanding of what you're going to get into. If you think you're just going to wing it, you're not going to last very long in the sales world, period.
Yeah. Okay. So let's say we're having our initial conversation and we're talking product, because a lot of this, I'd say a lot of the objections, at least technical objections, tend to happen up front, right? We try to get those squared away before the POC when we're writing out criteria for a POC, right? So we're trying to get any sort of technical objections taken care of before we put in the work of setting up and running a POC and all that entails, right? When we're having these meetings, we're listening, right? We're listening to what they're saying of what the objection is, right? And you talked about this in the beginning. We're trying to go back to the root of why. But something else we left out of that we keep talking about, and I'm going to bring back up again too, is the pain. We always need to relate this back to the pain that they're having. How does this objection relate to the pain that they're having? Well, you're telling me you're having this problem. How does this objection relate to that problem, right? And again, this goes back to being empathetic, right, putting yourself in the customer's shoes, and trying to see things from their point of view, but also have your expertise on top of that, because you have another angle into their problem, right? Something that they might not have seen.
Right.
Yeah. I mean,
if I could double tap on that real quick, like it goes back empathy and sympathy, right? It goes back both ways too. One of my favorite strategies and tactics is just being honest as well. So let's say we can find some pain. The most easiest question I like to ask that helps with objection handling is, what would get you to say no, right? Can you give me a list of things that you need, right? You've labeled those out. These are kind of your objections or whatever. What would get you to say no, right? If we can get them to list out what would get them to say no, then we can work towards a common goal, because it may be feasible, and this is going to be very hard for a lot of people to hear. You have to sometimes walk away from a deal. You have to sometimes be a better person for both sides of this and say it's not a good fit.
There's two winners in every deal.
Solution for you. Maybe you're. Yeah, who are they, Keith?
Yeah, the one that wins the deal and the first one to walk away.
That is a fact, man. Because if you're trying to square peg, round hole this whole thing, you're doing a disservice to everyone, and it's okay to be honest and upfront, is what I'm saying. Even with some of those objections, you can be like, you're not ready, we're not ready, it's not a good fit. Dude, that's win-win, right? People appreciate that in my experience.
Yeah, they appreciate the honesty. So what I'm hearing then is objection handling isn't all about trying to change their mind or their opinion. You may come to an impasse, and it may become a qualification event, right? Where you just go, you know what? We're just not the right fit for you. You buy us, you're going to be unhappy. There's a company that does it better than we do for cheaper than we do, because that's not really what we do, right? But before you get there, you want to make sure that you've done your due diligence, that because you don't want to go back to your sales leader just going, oh, well, we couldn't meet their objections, so you're disqualifying every single lead that comes in, right? So you need to best effort, put in this earnest attempt to make it work, right? To try and overcome objections. But yes, of course, there's still going to be times where you reach an impasse. Better to find out early than later, though. I'd much rather find out I'm going to lose a deal in the first, 2 or 3 meetings than after I've done a POC and, we're in contract negotiations. Because that's a whole lot of time wasted that I could have been doing this for somebody who is going to buy, right?
That's spot on. And it's not always a hard no either. Let's say we have 4 things that are absolutely required, and we know we can do 3, and the 4th is kind of questionable. You ask that hard question. Is this a showstopper, right? Is this all hands on deck? We're not going any farther. They may say, well, I'm not sure. All right, well, what can we do? Again, that's an opportunity to really pivot and dig in and build a partnership or a relationship with a potential customer. So again, it doesn't have to be pass fail for everything. There's room for it, but it's about being honest,
Yeah, and I think the key word you use there is partnership too, right? It is a partnership, because there is give and take as well. Because you and I have both had experiences where the customer goes, I really need this and your product doesn't have it. And we go, you're right. We don't have that. And we have the discussion. We figure out, yes, they truly do need this thing. And we bring that back to our leadership, and our leadership goes, okay, well, we can get that implemented, right? Other people, it's on the roadmap anyway. Other people have been asking for it. We can get that implemented. And then we can overcome that objection by baking it into the contract. It's risky for the software company. If they don't have a good product team, it's incredibly risky because they can get sued. But if they do have a good product team, then that's an easy objection to overcome. Which also brings up a good point too, is don't necessarily try and handle some of these objections in a vacuum. There's going to be some things like that are over your head that you have nothing to do with. Get senior leadership involved. They should know better than anybody how to handle objections.
I look at it again. I love making my analogies the thing that makes sense, right? It's like dating, right? Let's say we were dating and you meet somebody and and you tell them, hey, I am a gambler, a drinker, and a womanizer, and I drive a Ford, F-350 diesel. And they're like, I'm all right with everything but that F-350 diesel. I'm only EVs. Are you going to back out of that deal? Right? Are you going to say, you know what? I might be open to a hybrid. I might be open to an electric car, right? Let me go ahead and circle back and figure out what's what. You're not necessarily going to walk away based on one hard no. And to your point, maybe it's just something that hasn't been thought about yet from the organization. Maybe there's something we can do going forward, or it's part of our vision of what we want to become. So to your point, exactly, right? Circle it in.
So let's move forward now. So the objection comes in. I almost look at these as literal hurdles, right? You're in a meeting, you're chugging along, running, hurdle comes, and the hurdle is the objection, and you clear it and you go on to the next one, right? But they got to end. So how do you steer the conversation forward? Because this is another problem that I have had sink me in like discovery meetings, where the entire meeting just turns into objection after objection after objection after objection. And most of them aren't valid objections. It's usually when you've got the guy in the room that's trying to show I'm the smartest guy here, so I'm going to object on everything. So how do you continue to move the conversation forward after handling the objection?
Yeah, this is where I think cybersecurity falls flat altogether, but I've seen success in other verticals of selling different sorts of software is, again, do we understand the pain and do we understand the business value? Why do I say that? If we know that they have real pain and they're objecting to some things, is it a problem they're trying to solve now? There's three questions I love to ask. Why do anything, right? Why now? And why us? So why us? We're working through objections. They got a competitor. Okay, we can overcome that. Why do anything? We think that they have pain. If they can't tell me why now, if why now is not something they care about, then that's very hard to come over. But if they tell you, well, I have to solve this problem in this quarter because I have this much budget, or this year because I have this initiative that my personal KPIs are bound to, now we're cooking with bacon grease, right? We can work backwards, establishing timelines and going to there where we're saying, I understand your objections. If I can get you to say yes, right, versus all these no's, I can help you solve this problem. Again, Keith, we're trying to keep it simple. Back to pain, baby. Timeline.
Okay, so I'm going to summarize what I think I've heard from this episode, and that's build a relationship and do your homework, because the more you know about your customer, the easier it is to overcome your objections or to walk away from the deal, but walk away still feeling good, like there's a good partnership intact. What about you? Do you have any key takeaways from this? Anything you'd like to point out to the audience or maybe summarize?
Yeah, I'd like to just reiterate it that one more time is the three whys, right? Why do anything? Why my particular solution? And why now? Addressing those, right? You know how to handle those objections respectively, kind of like you mapped out there, Keith. So very important to remember.
Yeah. Now, a lot of these objections, like I said, come up during the discovery process, which transition is what we plan on talking about in our next episode of Alter the Demo Gods. We want to talk a little bit more about discovery and gathering requirements and trying to understand what it is that the customer needs. if you've enjoyed this episode and you want to learn more, you can go learn all about things Altar of the Demo Gods by going to demogodspod.com. If you have questions for us or suggestions for episodes, maybe you think you'd be a good guest, email us at demogodspod@gmail.com. I'm Keith Wilson, joined by my host, John Morton. John, it's been great having you on, and hope to talk to everybody next week. Thanks for joining us on Altar of the Demo Gods.